No one in the courtroom expected what happened next. The room was already tense, the air thick with anticipation, when a single name was mentioned, and everything changed. K. Flock, usually composed, usually silent, suddenly snapped. His reaction wasn't subtle. It wasn't quiet. It was raw, explosive, and caught on camera for everyone to see. Because in that moment, he realized something every street figure fears more than prison itself. Someone close had turned on him. This wasn't just testimony. This wasn't just paperwork or legal language. This was betrayal playing out in real time. As prosecutors began laying out details, pointing to statements, dates, and conversations, the weight of it hit K. Flock all at once. A person he once trusted, someone tied to the same circle, the same code, was now cooperating. And the shock of it broke through every layer of control he had built up. Witnesses inside the courtroom said the atmosphere shifted instantly. K. Flock's body language changed. His face tightened. He leaned forward, eyes locked, disbelief turning into rage. When the realization fully set in, he couldn't hold it back anymore. The scream wasn't planned. It wasn't for tension. It was the sound of someone watching their world collapse from the inside out. For those who understand street rules, this moment meant everything. Snitching isn't just a legal move. It's a line that, once crossed, changes lives forever. Careers end. Trust dies. And in K. Flock's case, the consequences could stretch far beyond a single sentence. What made this moment even more chilling was how public it was. Cameras were rolling, reporters were watching, and the reaction spread online within minutes. Clips began circulating almost immediately, slowed down, replayed, dissected. Fans argued over what it meant. Was it anger? Was it disbelief? Or was it the realization that the case had just taken a turn he couldn't recover from? One thing was clear. This wasn't just another court update. This was a turning point. In this video, we're breaking down exactly who snitched, what was revealed in court, and why K. Flock's reaction says more than any testimony ever could. Because when betrayal comes from inside, the damage hits different. And this moment may have sealed everything. The courtroom felt unusually quiet that day. The kind of silence that presses down on your chest and makes every small sound feel amplified. K. Flock sat at the defense table, shoulders stiff, eyes forward, trying to keep the same unreadable expression he had worn through countless hearings. He had learned quickly that showing emotion in a place like this could be used against you. Every glance, every reaction, every breath was being watched, not just by the judge and lawyers, but by deputies, reporters, and people who once called him family. At first, nothing seemed different. Papers shuffled. The prosecutor spoke in a steady, almost casual tone, laying out details in a way that felt routine. Dates, locations, conversations. K. Flock listened without reacting, already familiar with the state's strategy. He had heard accusations before. He had prepared himself for evidence, for videos, for witnesses from outside his circle. That was expected. What he wasn't prepared for was the name that came next. When it was spoken, the room shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a slight pause, a subtle change in energy. But K. Flock felt it instantly. His head tilted almost imperceptibly, as if his mind was double-checking what his ears had just heard. The name belonged to someone who wasn't supposed to be on that side of the room. Someone who had shared spaces with him, trusted conversations, loyalty built in moments that were never meant to be repeated under oath. The prosecutor continued, explaining statements, cooperation, timelines. With every sentence, the reality settled in deeper. This wasn't hearsay. This wasn't speculation. This was cooperation. Signed papers, recorded interviews, a full turn. K. Flock's jaw tightened. His hands clenched together, knuckles whitening as he leaned forward slightly in his chair. For the first time, the mask cracked. People sitting behind him noticed the change before the outburst came. His breathing grew heavier. His eyes locked onto the prosecution table, then flicked toward the deputies, then back again. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was betrayal hitting all at once. In the streets, there are few rules that matter more than loyalty. You can lose money. You can lose freedom. But once trust is gone, everything collapses with it. The prosecutor didn't slow down. They kept talking, reading portions of testimony, describing how information was provided, how details only someone close could know were confirmed. Each word felt like a punch. K-Flock shook his head slowly at first, as if refusing to accept what was happening. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, trying to calm him, but it was already too late. The scream came suddenly, cutting through the courtroom like glass breaking. It wasn't planned or controlled. It was raw, filled with rage and disbelief. The sound of someone realizing that the walls were closing in faster than expected. Deputies reacted immediately, shifting positions, hands moving instinctively. The judge called for order, voice sharp, but the moment had already landed. Everyone froze. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in. People in the gallery exchanged looks, some shocked, others grimly unsurprised. K-Flock stood up halfway before being pulled back into his seat, shouting words that echoed with anger and hurt. It wasn't just about the case anymore. It was personal, deeply personal. In that instant, the courtroom stopped feeling like a legal space and started feeling like the streets, where betrayal carries consequences that no sentence can measure. K-Flock's reaction wasn't just anger at the evidence. It was the realization that someone he trusted had chosen self-preservation over loyalty, freedom over silence. And once that line is crossed, there's no going back. As order was restored and the proceedings continued, K-Flock sat back down, chest rising and falling rapidly. His face had changed. The defiance was still there, but underneath it was something new, something darker. The knowledge that the case had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. That this wasn't just the state versus him anymore. It was his own past standing up and pointing a finger. From that moment on, nothing in the room felt the same. Every word spoken afterward carried more weight. Every glance felt loaded. The damage had been done, not just legally, but psychologically. Because when betrayal comes from inside your own circle, it doesn't just hurt, it rewrites everything you thought you knew about loyalty, survival, and who you can trust when everything is on the line. After the outburst, the courtroom never fully recovered its balance. Even as the judge threatened removal and the deputies eased back into position, the tension lingered like smoke that refused to clear. K-Flock sat rigid, eyes burning, replaying the last few minutes over and over in his head. Betrayal has a sound, and he had just heard it spoken aloud in a place where words carry the power to steal years from a life. The prosecutor resumed, carefully this time, choosing language that sounded calm but carried sharp edges. They spoke about cooperation agreements, about how insiders often provide context that cameras and surveillance can't. They didn't need to dramatize it. The implication alone was enough. Someone from inside the circle had given structure to the state's narrative, filling in gaps that otherwise might have remained speculation. K-Flock's attorney objected repeatedly, arguing relevance, tone, prejudice. Each objection was met with brief consideration and, more often than not, denial. The case was moving forward whether anyone liked it or not. And with every passing minute, it became clearer that this wasn't just about isolated incidents anymore. It was about painting a complete picture, one built with help from someone who knew the rhythm of K-Flock's life. In the gallery, reactions were split. Some people shook their heads, knowing exactly what cooperation like this could mean. Others leaned forward, hungry for every detail, understanding that moments like this rarely happen in public view. Online, the story was already spreading. Clips of the outburst circulated fast, slowed down, zoomed in, analyzed frame by frame. Fans debated whether the reaction showed guilt, anger, or simply the pain of betrayal. Critics called it a loss of control. Supporters called it human. What didn't get captured on camera was the silence afterward. The way K-Flock stayed straight ahead, jaw tight, refusing to look back at anyone. The way his hands trembled briefly before he forced them still. In that silence, something shifted internally. Street cases aren't just fought with lawyers and evidence. They are fought in the mind. And this revelation had opened a new front in that battle. As testimony continued, references to messages, meetings, and movements were introduced, not as definitive proof, but as context. Always context. The prosecution made sure to emphasize that cooperation doesn't stand alone. It's used to support other evidence. Still, everyone in the room understood the unspoken truth. Insider cooperation can be devastating, not because it creates facts, but because it connects them. K. Flock's lawyer leaned in again, voice low, steady, reminding him where he was, what was at stake. There would be time to respond, time to challenge credibility, time to expose motives. Cooperation often comes with incentives, and incentives raise questions. That was the strategy now. Attack reliability, suggest self-interest, frame the testimony as survival rather than truth. But strategy doesn't erase emotion. In the streets, cooperation isn't analyzed in legal terms. It's seen as a line crossed, a door slammed shut forever. K. Flock knew that even if the case somehow shifted in his favor, the damage to trust was permanent. Names once spoken with familiarity would now carry a different weight. Outside the courthouse, rumors multiplied. People claimed to know who had talked, others denied it. Misinformation spreading faster than facts. Old photos resurfaced. Old lyrics were reinterpreted. Old interviews clipped and reposted as if they had predicted this exact moment. The internet did what it always does, turn a complex, ongoing legal process into a spectacle. Inside, the judge called a short recess. K. Flock was escorted out, head down, surrounded by deputies. As he walked, his posture said everything. This wasn't fair. It was fury held tightly in check, the kind that simmers rather than explodes, waiting for a moment that may never come. Back in the holding area, away from cameras and crowds, reality set in harder. Cooperation changes cases. It alters timelines, strengthens narratives, and pressures defendants into decisions they never planned to make. Pleas get discussed. Risks get recalculated. Futures get weighed in years instead of hopes. When court resumed, K. Flock returned quieter, more controlled. The outburst was over, but its impact remained. The prosecution didn't need to push anymore. The message had already landed. This case was no longer just about what the state could prove. It was about who had decided to speak and why. And as the day came to an end, one thing was undeniable. Whatever happened next, whatever verdict or sentence waited down the line, this was the moment everything changed. Not because of a piece of evidence, but because loyalty, once assumed unbreakable, had fractured in front of everyone, leaving consequences that would echo far beyond the courtroom walls. By the time the next phase of the case unfolded, the shock had settled into something heavier. The courtroom no longer felt like a place of sudden explosions, but like a pressure chamber where every second added weight. K. Flock walked in with a different energy, calmer on the surface, but sharper underneath. The outburst was behind him, yet everyone could sense that something inside had hardened. This wasn't denial anymore. It was preparation. The prosecution leaned into momentum. They didn't rush. They knew they didn't have to. Instead, they methodically laid out how insider knowledge fits into larger cases, explaining patterns, movements, and relationships in a way that felt almost clinical. It wasn't about dramatics now. It was about structure, about showing the court that this wasn't a random story stitched together, but a narrative supported from multiple angles. References were made to past events, old associations, and moments that once seemed insignificant. None of it was presented as standalone proof, but together it formed a web that felt increasingly tight. K. Flock listened closely, eyes tracking every word, every shift in tone. He had learned long ago that silence can be louder than argument. Still, his jaw clenched whenever cooperation was indirectly mentioned, even without names. His defense team focused on one key idea: motive. People don't cooperate for nothing. Fear, pressure, deals, these are powerful forces. They reminded the court that insiders often speak to save themselves, to reduce sentences, to escape consequences. Truth, they argued, can get bent when survival is on the line. It was a familiar argument, but one that needed careful handling. Push too hard, and it looks like deflection. Push too little, and the narrative sticks. Outside, the story continued to grow legs. Social media timelines were flooded with speculation. Some claimed the case was already over. Others insisted the cooperation meant nothing without hard proof. Fans dissected every court sketch, every facial expression, every rumored detail. K-Flock's music re-entered conversations, lyrics pulled apart as if they were coded confessions. The line between art and reality blurred even more than it already had. Inside the holding cells between sessions, the atmosphere was different from the courtroom. Quieter, colder. This was where reality spoke without microphones. Cooperation changes how people look at you, even before a verdict. Conversations become shorter. Trust evaporates. Everyone starts calculating distance. How close is too close? Who knows what? Who might talk next? K-Flock felt that shift immediately. When proceedings resumed, the judge addressed conduct and order, a subtle reminder of boundaries. K-Flock nodded, controlled, giving nothing away. He knew every reaction would be remembered, replayed, interpreted. The mistake had already happened. There would be no more fuel added. As testimony continued, the focus shifted toward corroboration. Surveillance footage, phone records, timelines. The prosecution emphasized that insider statements were supported by external evidence. Not proven, supported. The language mattered. It always does. K-Flock's lawyer took notes rapidly, preparing to challenge every connection, every assumption. This wasn't about winning today. It was about survival tomorrow. The emotional weight, however, couldn't be argued away. Betrayal lingers. It changes how you hear your own past. Moments that once felt solid now feel questionable. Conversations replay in your head with new meaning. K-Flock sat there, forced to confront not just the state's case, but his own history. Who stood where? Who said what? Who might have been listening more closely than he realized. As the day dragged on, fatigue set in. Not physical tiredness, but mental exhaustion. The kind that comes from holding everything in, from maintaining control while your future is discussed like an abstract concept. Years reduced to numbers. Freedom measured in legal language. When court finally adjourned, there was no drama, no shouting, no reaction. K-Flock was let out quietly, face unreadable. But those who had been watching closely knew better. This stage of the case wasn't loud, but it was dangerous. Because now, the fight wasn't just against accusations. It was against narratives forming in real time. And once a narrative takes hold, it's hard to break. Especially when it's built on words spoken by someone who was never supposed to speak at all. As the case moved deeper, the atmosphere around K-Flock shifted from shock to inevitability. The courtroom no longer buzzed with sudden reactions or whispered gasps. Instead, it felt heavy, deliberate, like everyone understood they were watching a slow, decisive process unfold. The initial betrayal had done its damage. Now came the consequences, measured, methodical, and relentless. The prosecution adjusted its tone. Where earlier sessions had focused on revealing cooperation, this stage was about reinforcing it. They framed the insider's statements as a roadmap, not the destination. Step by step, they connected timelines to physical evidence, locations to movements, and associations to intent. Each piece alone might have seemed ordinary. Together, they formed a story that felt increasingly difficult to ignore. K-Flock sat through it all with a controlled stillness. His posture was straight, hands folded, eyes forward. Gone was the visible anger. In its place was focus. He understood now that emotion only feeds the narrative he was fighting against. This wasn't the streets, where reaction can be read as strength. This was court, where silence can be survival. His defense team shifted tactics slightly, leaning into credibility battles. They questioned inconsistencies, highlighted gaps, and reminded the court that memory is fragile, especially under pressure. They emphasized that insiders often shape their stories to match what they think prosecutors want to hear. Cooperation, they argued, doesn't automatically equal truth. It equals incentive. Behind the scenes, the weight of the case grew heavier. Legal discussions turned serious. Every option, every risk, every possible outcome had to be considered. This is the part the public rarely sees. The calculations, the sleepless nights, the quiet realization that outcomes are narrowing. K. Flock's future was no longer abstract. It was being measured in concrete possibilities. Outside the courtroom, narratives hardened. Media headlines became more confident, less speculative. Words like allegedly appeared less often, replaced by assumptions framed as analysis. Fans were split down the middle. Some held on to loyalty, insisting he was being targeted, set up by someone trying to save themselves. Others saw the cooperation as the final nail, proof that the system had finally caught up. The psychological toll was undeniable. K. Flock's world had shrunk to routines. Court, holding cells, brief conversations with his legal team. Every day felt the same, yet heavier than the last. Trust became a memory rather than a reality. Even within controlled environments, awareness sharpened. Who listens? Who talks? Who benefits? As testimony continued, the judge frequently reminded both sides to stay within limits, a sign of how intense the proceedings had become. This wasn't a flashy trial, but it was a consequential one. The kind where small details matter, where tone and timing can influence perception just as much as facts. K. Flock remained quiet, but observers noticed subtle changes. Less eye contact with the gallery, longer moments of stillness. The look of someone conserving energy for what lies ahead. This wasn't defeat, it was endurance. What made this phase especially heavy was the absence of resolution. No dramatic reveal, no final moment, just a growing sense that the path forward was narrowing, that the choices ahead would define everything that followed. By the end of the day, it was clear that the case had entered its most dangerous stage, not because of new accusations, but because the groundwork had been laid. The betrayal had opened the door, the evidence had walked in, and now, the weight of it all sat squarely on K. Flock's shoulders. The streets have rules that are loud and unforgiving. The courtroom has rules that are quiet and final. And as this case pushed forward, one truth became impossible to ignore. Once the process reaches this point, there are no small moments left, only consequences waiting to be decided. As the proceedings edged closer to their most critical stretch, the mood around K. Flock became unmistakably final. There was no longer any debate about whether the case was serious or how deeply it could affect his life. That question had already been answered. Now, everything revolved around how it would end, and how much damage had already been done before a verdict was ever spoken. The prosecution stopped introducing surprises. They didn't need to. Instead, they revisited key points, reinforcing the same narrative from multiple angles. Repetition in court isn't accidental. It's designed to settle ideas into place, to make them feel familiar, almost obvious. Timelines were revisited. Connections were restated. The insider's cooperation was no longer the headline. It was the backbone, quietly supporting everything else. K. Flock's legal team pushed back where they could, carefully, strategically. They challenged assumptions, questioned interpretations, and emphasized that correlation is not confirmation. But the tone had changed. This was no longer a fight to dismantle the entire case. It was a fight to limit damage, to preserve room for doubt, to keep doors from closing completely. Inside K. Flock, something had shifted again. The anger that once burned openly had cooled into something heavier, acceptance mixed with resolve. He understood now that reacting emotionally wouldn't change what had already been set in motion. The betrayal couldn't be undone. The statements couldn't be unheard. The only thing left within his control was how he carried himself through what came next. The courtroom watched closely. Judges and juries noticed consistency. They noticed restraint. They noticed when someone learned from mistakes. K. Flock sat still, composed, absorbing every word like it mattered. Because it did. Every sentence spoken in that room was shaping a future that would follow him for the rest of his life. Outside, the conversation had grown colder. Less speculation, more certainty. People talked about outcomes as if they were inevitable, forgetting that legal processes are rarely as simple as headlines make them seem. Still, perception carries power, and perception had already begun to harden against him. In the quieter moments, walking through hallways, waiting and holding areas, reality pressed in harder than ever. This wasn't about reputation anymore. It wasn't about music, image, or influence. It was about time. Years. Decades. The kind of time that changes people permanently. As the day ended, K-Flock stood as he was escorted out, face calm, shoulders squared. There was no drama left to give, only endurance. Whatever the final outcome would be, this chapter had already left its mark. Because when loyalty breaks and the system moves forward, there's no rewind, only consequences that echo long after the courtroom empties. By the time everything reached its final stretch, the noise around the case had faded into something colder and more permanent. There were no more shocking revelations, no explosive reactions left to give. What remained was the weight of reality settling in, heavy and unavoidable. K-Flock understood now that this wasn't about one scream, one name, or one moment of betrayal. It was about how a single crack had widened into something that could no longer be sealed. The courtroom felt smaller than it did at the beginning. Not physically, but mentally. Every face seemed familiar. Every sound felt repetitive. The process moved forward with an almost mechanical rhythm, and that rhythm made one thing clear. The system doesn't rush, but it also doesn't forget. Everything that had been said, every document filed, every statement recorded, was now part of a permanent record that would follow him wherever this road ended. K-Flock sat through the final sessions with a calm that surprised even those closest to him. The anger had burned out, replaced by focus and restraint. He listened carefully, not because he expected miracles, but because understanding mattered. Knowing how things were being framed, how arguments were landing, and how the room reacted gave him a sense of control in a situation where control was scarce. The prosecution spoke with confidence, not arrogance. They emphasized continuity, how one piece led to another, how the story held together without needing exaggeration. Cooperation was mentioned, but no longer highlighted. It had already done its job. The narrative now stood on its own, reinforced by repetition and structure. This was the endgame: make the story feel complete. The defense responded with discipline. They didn't try to rewrite history. They focused on uncertainty, on reminding the court that assumptions can be dangerous and incentives can distort truth. They spoke about pressure, about fear, about how people make choices when facing long sentences of their own. It wasn't a loud defense, but it was deliberate. Every word was chosen carefully, knowing this might be the last chance to plant doubt where certainty was forming. Throughout it all, K-Flock remained silent. No reactions, no visible frustration, just stillness, the kind that comes when someone has already confronted the wise possibilities in their own mind. In that stillness was an understanding that some battles aren't won by fighting harder, but by enduring longer. Outside the courtroom, the public conversation had reached its conclusion. People had picked sides and settled into their beliefs. Some spoke with sympathy, others with judgment. Few waited for the full picture. That's how these stories always go. Complex realities reduced to simple narratives. K-Flock knew that whatever happened next, the world would move on quickly, even if his life didn't. As the final words of the day were spoken, the room felt strangely quiet. Not tense, not dramatic, just resolved. K-Flock stood when instructed, hands at his sides, posture steady. There was no sign of fear on his face, but there was no illusion either. This was the result of choices, circumstances,